Hello, and welcome back to the Boston Review. This week's incredulous installment will be split into two parts. Part 1, that's what you're listening to right now, will feature commentary from Comrade Scott, Joe, Janice, Sarah, and myself. Among our news items, Biden, still a liar. The European Union concludes that Americans ingest ungodly amounts of hazardous chemicals. Amnesty International finally acknowledges Israeli apartheid. Blue states have given up on mask mandates. And your take on Ukraine sucks. And then we buckle down for the first half of a tragic story in the making, the privatization of Medicare. You'll have even more reasons to hate Nixon, Clinton, Bush Jr., and Obama. Please do us a bit and share this guide. Do something, enjoy our back.
6 former administration officials last week wrote that open letter urging the administration to change course, to change strategy. Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
Hey folks, we're back. How you doing?
Welcome.
Now, if you do good, you'll see me one more time. If you do bad, you'll see me 2 more times.
You're not making any sense.
Joe, that's from Mulholland Drive, you fucking Philistines. Joe, do the news.
Sorry we aren't as cool as you are. I thought you were trying to be like, I don't know, like, what do you call it? Never mind.
Yeah, just like
there's 2 guardians at the door. One always tells the truth and one always lies, like that sort of shit.
Kind of, but I was thinking more
it's
like
nice to mix it up. I haven't been called a Philistine in a while.
what do you call it? The lady in the mirror? You say her name, Bloody Mary. Like, you say her name a bunch of times, and then I was like, "Where are you going with this?" Anyway, yes, news.
So yeah, news. Pretty much all of it's bad as usual. I mean, what the fuck else is new? We're in a Dickensian capitalist hellscape that's on fire all of the time.
So, Joe, how big are the flames this week?
Depending on where you live, pretty bad. If you're in the United States, pretty bad. So I think I'm going to do what I usually do and start with the least terrible thing and then ramp my way up, like slowly boil the frog. And in this case, the baseline is not too great because Joe Biden is too much of a wuss to say this in himself. That trot out the first lady who is a community college teacher to say that, we know that we campaigned on free community college, but we can't be bothered to do it. Even though the proposal, which was pretty weak shit to begin with, considering the fact that it's
weak. Is Joe weirdly choppy for anyone else, by the way?
No, he sounds awful.
Only had like $45.5 billion in funding, which is
okay.
By the Department of Education's own estimate, would have only been enough to fund free community college for 5 years anyways. And they were like, "Yeah, no, sorry, can't. Too expensive.
We don't want to give We don't want to give the working class any fucking shit. What are you talking about?"
Yeah, exactly. It's to further hammer home this point. They started talking about how student borrowers need to prepare for repayments to begin in May, and that it is the responsibility of borrowers to do their part, even though at this point I would rather have my loans serviced by a loan shark, because at least they will still be predatory, but they will be upfront with me when they come to break my legs for missing a payment.
Joe, work out your routine ahead of time.
Basically being predatory with its interest rates, but still tries to convince people that it's not preying on helpless teenagers and everyone else that gets coerced into student loan debt.
We gotta create that permanent underclass, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't really like the idea of being in the permanent underclass. I want to have a longer life expectancy.
People are clamoring, they're saying, bring back the Lumpent proletariat.
The what?
Dude, we used to talk about the Lumpent proletariat like almost every other show. Sarah.
What are you saying? No, what word are you saying?
Lumpent proletariat. Lumpent proletariat.
Lumpent.
The Lumpent proletariat. The Lumpent. Lumpent means below.
Oh, okay. I was like...
So proletariat means a working class person who has class consciousness.
I just Googled it. I just wasn't...
Yeah.
I thought you said lumpy for a second.
So lumpent means
lumpy proletariat.
Below. Lumpent proletariat.
No, there's
Just
no,
like humble.
there's
or
no
now.
T in lumpen. Lumpen proletariat.
Lumpen proletarian. Lumpen means below. Lumpen. I'm not saying lumpent. I'm saying lumpen. Fuck you. I did say lumpent the first time. Fuck all of you. I'm canceling this show again. Fuck you.
No.
Okay.
Well, that was quick.
Yeah, Joe.
We lasted all of 5 minutes.
Biden did that. He's not canceling your student fucking debt. He's not giving you free college. He's not giving you health care. He's just telling you that the world's going to end.
I am fully aware of all of these things.
Ushering in the end of the American empire and the domination, financially at least, by China. So here we go. He's getting us ready for that. He's priming the pumps. He's being the cowboy. He's priming the pumps. We're ready to go off the ground.
Priming the cowboy.
Uh-huh. That big
When he knows
bull.
what decade it is.
Take that word to mean whatever you want. Anyways, Joe, what's the next story? About chemicals fucking up humans? That sounds bad.
Specifically Americans, because we don't have any safety standards, apparently. So this is a headline that I saw Sunday morning in The Guardian. Americans are exposed to toxic BPA at levels far above what the European Union considers to be safe. A comprehensive review of recent studies into a chemical often used in plastics and resins has revealed that the average American is exposed to levels of dangerous compound that are 5,000 times higher than what the European Union considers to be safe at this current time.
Yep.
BPA is a toxic chemical that humans are largely exposed to it via plastic and metal food packaging. And basically, the European Union's Food Safety Administration, or European Food Safety Authority, concluded that BPA exposure in the United States represents a high health risk for Americans of all ages. Pretty much the only thing that the FDA has banned BPA in is like sippy cups, infant formula, and baby bottles are like the only things BPA is actually banned in the United States from being used.
I say expose them young, prime their immune systems to just accept the plastic and incorporate it into their cells.
Mm-hmm.
Before they can talk or walk. Mm-hmm. Just normalize it. It's like allergies. You got to expose them when they're young.
Yeah.
And then they'll be fine when they grow up.
So we should just give everybody cancer early?
No, not. I mean,
because
maybe
the chemicals apparently causes a range of healthcare problems, including cancer, immunotoxicity, neurological toxicity, behavioral changes, decreased sperm count, among others.
Did you say decreased or increased sperm count?
Decreased.
Good morning. Sunday morning.
I would like to offer some clarification for any listeners who might be confused. So they said BPA, which is a plastic. They did not mean BPDA, which is also a toxic thing that Americans are exposed to.
Very good.
Wow.
We got fucking comedians on this fucking
I was
podcast
waiting I was like trying to hold
bitch.
I was trying so hard to hold that in my brain
Joe,
so
I'm
I
gonna
didn't
lick
get
your
like
mouth.
distracted. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah, what the fuck, Scott? That's a new one.
Exactly.
I
Scott, what the
a
fuck?
mental image today of like people making out where their lips are covered in mustard.
Okay, then. Moving on.
This is because I remember the ad that I saw in Montreal, which is like French's mustard, and then the ad was just like French's too. They can be interpreted multiple ways, but it's like, do you want a French but with like mustard? Anyway, that was some things that happened today.
Okay, then.
Well, I guess if you're...
I'm sorry.
So, last
Joe,
week...
what's the second damn oh, wait, well, we already talked about that. I'm sorry. I had to say something to make you just completely catch you off guard, and it worked. Oh, what's the
next story, Joseph?
I was getting to that when you interrupted me.
Joe?
Yes? Yes, Scott?
Go on, sir.
Last week,
Fucker.
you know it's bad when your client state fucks up so badly that
Wasn't me.
Israel actually gets in trouble for once. Amnesty International published a report last week that actually straight up concludes that Israel is an apartheid state and is committing ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Last Tuesday, Amnesty International concluded that Israel has been
simply irresistible.
Engaged in a campaign of subjecting Palestinians to a system of apartheid founded on policies of, quote, segregation, dispossession, and exclusion, and that Amnesty International claims amounts to crimes against humanity. It's a 211-page report into Israeli seizures on Palestinian land and property, unlawful killings, forcible transfers of people, and denial of citizenship. They're also comparing Israel to white South Africa in the 20th century. So yeah, it's kind of surprising because since when does Amnesty International actually acknowledge reality?
I don't know. Tell me.
To be fair, the American branch of Amnesty International clarified that they make no moral judgment on apartheid. They just recognize that it's happening.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Isn't just using the word apartheid a moral judgment? Because they could come up with some sort of bullshit
they're preserving their nation state.
Yeah.
The branch of Amnesty International that published the report is based in London, so it's not the American branch.
So
no.
You can't contradict the Central Committee, but you can make some shit up and talk around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's also true. Mm-hmm. The report concludes that Israel is enforcing a system of oppression and domination against Palestinians wherever it has control over their rights, including basically every Arab in the occupied territories as well as in Israel itself. And along with forcible transfers, tortures, and unlawful killings, the report also says that Israel is intending to maintain a system of oppression and domination that constitutes crimes against humanity. So the Israelis aren't happy about this because, it's true.
Oh, they're not? They should probably stop killing Palestinians then.
Yeah, tell it to them. They'll give you probably give you some bullshit about how they have a right to exist.
Yeah, they don't speak English.
Is that a critique of the Palestinians? They don't speak English?
No. That's not,
is that an Israeli critique of Palestinians? Is what I mean?
No.
Was that racist?
Is that are you doing a racism? Is that a racism you're doing? Oh no! Someone pull out the yellow flag. We have a racism on the field.
We don't do soccer in this country.
That didn't go well. That didn't go over well. Joe. Joe. Is soccer the only sport that has the yellow flag?
That I can think of off the top of my head.
What about football?
So football have flag football.
There's only one flag in football.
All right, shut the fuck up, everybody.
Yeah,
I don't know sports.
I don't know sports either.
Sports.
I know when sports are happening because at the grocery store there'll be sports. There'll be different displays and it'll be sport happening.
Yeah, a bunch of cases of Pepsi arranged into
exactly, and
Cool
there's a bunch of 7-layer dip and Doritos. Yeah, exactly.
Dip for Dorito 7
and Patriots, things like that. Yeah, that's how I know.
No, it's just seven-layer dip flavored Doritos.
I know what sports are happening.
It's 7-layer dip, but every layer tastes like Cool Ranch Dorito.
Just different textures. The only difference between the layers is just the texture. It's some are a little bit slimy and some are crunchy.
Ew. So some shit going on with that Ukraine.
Baby.
We're gonna talk about this. I don't fucking care. I don't
either.
I mean,
I don't care.
And I don't really anything happening because not really. The only place in the world that seems to think anything is happening in Ukraine is here.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're a Westerner that has an opinion on Russia and the Ukraine, shut the fuck up. You don't. I'm just telling you don't. You don't. It's simple as that.
You can have an opinion, in general, on self-determination, but that doesn't even really apply here either.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's also true.
Russia wouldn't exist if it weren't for us. It would still be the Soviet Union, probably. You know what I mean?
Exactly. 100%. I mean, basically our entire foreign policy for the last 20, 30 years of the Soviet Union's existence was just simply driving them to insolvency by making them try to keep pace with us in terms of defense spending. They just completely run out of money to spend on anything else. We're just trying to drive them into the ground through a Cold War of attrition.
I'm pretty sure there was recently an interview on Fox with like a former CIA director, and he just plainly said that we have in the past interfered in elections when the communists were going to win. And then when asked if the CIA is still doing that.
Yeah.
We've been doing that since the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The Lumpent proletariat. Ghost the movement.
Have we ever tried to meddle in other countries' elections?
Oh, probably. But it was for the good of the system in order to avoid the communists from taking over. For example, in Europe, in 47, 48, 49, the Greeks and the Italians, we
don't do that now, though? We don't mess around other people's elections, Jim?
Only for a very good cause.
Can you do that? Do a Vine video on a former CIA director.
Only for a very good cause in the interests of democracy.
All right, thanks for being here.
I'm confused. What does that have to do with Ukraine? I mean, I know that it has things to do with it, but I'm not sure what the point of what you're saying is.
The point is that, like, the U.S., our only foreign policy is to stick our fucking nose where it doesn't belong. And, like, in the case where we're kind of called upon to, like, perform some kind of noble act, as we would have been in World War II, we took a back seat and let shit play out on its own until we were on the receiving end of violence for once.
Yeah.
And then our response to that was literally fucking kill every single human being, like whether they're in the service or not. Civilians, children, who gives a shit?
It makes me think of that Winston Churchill quote of like, America can be relied upon to do the right thing only after it's tried everything else. We have yet to hit everything else yet.
Even he was a piece of shit, and he was right about us.
Yeah, I don't know about how to promote that. It's true, I guess.
You know, he was actually like mortified to his core that we used the atom bomb. Winston Churchill was easily the greatest.
Good for him. He was mortified.
It's the Onion headline of like, your worst enemy is right about something.
Like, Winston Churchill was the greatest war criminal of the 20th century, and you, like, shook him to his core.
I thought you thought that fucking murder bag, what's his face? Kissinger. I thought you thought he was the worst murder bag. I thought you thought he was the worst.
William Murderface.
In terms of, like, number of people killed, like, that are directly responsible, Winston Churchill has the highest kill count.
Oh, okay.
That are like directly like attributable to him.
So he's the worst serial killer of all time. Okay.
He was
directly responsible for multiple famines.
100 million dead.
The worst serial killer is fucking like microbes and shit.
Yeah.
Ain't no fucking human.
Yersinia Pestis is fucking the warlord. Damn you, Yersinia.
What the fuck are we even talking about anymore?
That was a plague reference.
I don't know. I'm confused.
That was a reference to the Black Plague. Thank you.
Black Plague, bad. Don't get it. It'll be bad for you. You know, it's the 20th.
Gonna have a bad time.
I almost said it's the 22nd century. It's the 21st century. So you might have better chances now, but still don't get it. But yeah, Michelle Wu, pretty bad mayor so far. Me sucks.
Yep.
You know? I mean, she is a Democrat, so like, there's only so much you can expect.
She is a Democrat.
Oh.
Oh no, she's a Democrat.
Well, I was going to tie that into the next story, which is how blue state Democratic governors are repealing mask mandates under the justification that, quote, we need to learn to live with the virus, which is basically a dog whistle for grandma needs to die.
More working class people.
We need to sacrifice the unvaccinated and the immunocompromised and the elderly because it's time to go back to brunch.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, actually, one of the members of the Worcester Board of Public Health said the other day, in his argument for why they should repeal Worcester's indoor mask mandate for schools, it's gone on too long, it's time to go back to normal, and that's pretty much all he said. And yesterday it was announced that Worcester, which is the second largest city in the state, has now voted to get rid of its indoor mask mandate and also the indoor mandate for schools. And today, 4 states have announced that they are getting rid of their mask mandates. Actually, no, 5, because earlier tonight, New York Governor Kathy Hochul announced that New York's indoor mask mandate is going to be terminated effective tomorrow morning. So they're fucked.
Hell yeah.
I love this whole, like, we need to live with the virus thing. Like, we need to be its friend. We need to accept it as one of us.
We
need to lean into the eugenics.
Can't virus shame, yo.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like what they say about like driving in bad weather. You just need to lean into the skid.
You got to be virus positive. Viruses of all shapes and sizes belong in our genome, okay?
Yeah, the problem is your attitude, not the fact that your grandma might die.
The virus is just kind of going through a thing right now. Give it space. Give it support. Just let it be its best.
Just let
virus
it kill you.
It would do it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay. So yeah, but like I said at the beginning of last month that like the Democrats are going to like give up on COVID and just open everything up because they don't want to be seen as weak. They don't want people being pissed at them for like not fixing COVID enough.
They don't want to be seen as weak baby men.
I read this article this morning about the mask mandates being shot down, and one of the people quoted is this like consultant, this like political consultant, and he said something to the effect of that it's important that Democrats be seen as returning things to normal, and that it's really important that like people see things as like things are going back to normal, and that most importantly that schools remain open. That was a direct quote, the last part. Like, most importantly, schools stay open. So I guess we got to keep pushing all of the school children and the school teachers who are unionized into the meat grinders, because if all the union teachers die, you can replace them with scabs.
Yeah, what that guy was really saying was, we got to keep...
Pretty much.
We got to keep it going.
Money printer go burn.
Oh, yeah.
That's what he was saying.
Thank you for translating for us, Scott.
Yeah. Money machine go burr. You know, it's actually really funny. It's not related, but I remember there was a 60 Minutes interview with then Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, and they asked him, how is the federal government going to pay for TARP? And he literally said, point blank on national television, money machine go burr. That's how we're paying for it.
I do not believe you.
No, yeah, he just looked at whoever the fuck it was like, money machine goes brrrr.
He didn't use those exact words, but he pretty much
he did the soy face, and then that's what he said. He didn't
say those exact words, but he pretty much said it.
Wet ass P word.
Interesting conjecture, but okay.
Conjecture.
Yeah.
Conjecture. Jesse, you have a thing you want to talk about? Joe's
the one who's going to have to lead us in here, because this is a story. We're going to do a history lesson.
Oh no!
Indeed.
No. Dude, we've been researching this shit for since we had the last episode together.
I'm kidding.
We're fucking doing it. I don't care. Listeners, strap in. Put on your jock strap. Get an unfiltered cigarette. No, get 3 of them. Light all 3 of them at the same time. Put on
3 unfiltered cigarette soaks.
Put on get like a big comfy chair and sit in it, and put on some goggles and fucking blast a giant speaker into your face.
Well, actually, personally, I'd like to start off by discussing why this is a topic of discussion right now, how direct contracting entities are all of a sudden somewhat in the picture.
Okay, Joe, what's direct contracting?
Wait. Fuck, we should probably plan this out better. So we still haven't even introduced what we're going to talk about.
Yeah,
what we are talking about today,
lead them in by
ladies,
the dick.
Gents, guys, gals, and NB pals, is the continued privatization of Medicare. It is the disintegration of the public health sector, and it's very dangerous, and it's going to affect us all.
Oh, no.
And you should care even if you have private health care now, because fucking when you're old, you're still going to have it. That was a bad way to get. That doesn't sound very scary. Okay. Old people are going to be fucked.
Yep.
There we go.
That's the laughter of the capitalist looking at all the old people as they're fucked.
I mean, I'm also I'm on disability, so this is my healthcare we're talking about too. This is an issue that is personal to me, but it will also affect tens of millions of other Americans. So it's a pretty big fucking deal. And the way that I look at it is it's going to be impossible to get our privately managed healthcare back into the public sector. It's easy, I mean, apparently, to shift it from public hands into private hands, but it is not going to be fucking easy to do the other way around.
We've been trying and failing at this for over a century.
Yeah, we suck.
Say that again?
We've been trying and failing to go from private to public healthcare in this country for over a century now.
Oh, okay.
So
we haven't been trying hard enough. That's what he said. No, Joe, go. I want to hear. This is actually interesting. Sorry.
So, it's really interesting. I found this on a .gov website. Actually, this
found it on a .gov.
From the National Council on Disability.gov, which has the emblem of the U.S. federal government. It is a website operated by the U.S. federal government, and it's about HMOs, the history of HMOs. We're starting in 1973 with the passage of the Health Management Organization Act of 1973, which is the beginning of the story of where public health care kind of goes downhill.
Chapter 1. Health Maintenance Organizations. The Nixon Era.
I thought it was a very telling passage. Quote, the purpose of the legislation was to stimulate greater competition with the healthcare markets by developing outpatient alternatives to expensive hospital-based treatments. Passage of this legislation also marked an important turning point in the United States healthcare industry because it introduced a concept of for-profit healthcare corporations to an industry long dominated by a not-for-profit business model. In the decade following the passage of the HMO Act in 1973, enrollment in HMOs grew slowly. Stiff opposition from the medical profession led to the imposition of regulatory restriction of HMO operations, but the continued rapid growth in healthcare outlays forced government officials to look elsewhere, which essentially means that they got rid of said regulations. And so...
And remind us who was president when this happened, Joe.
Richard Nixon.
Richard fucking Nixon.
That's why they called him Tricky Dick.
I found this quote about HMOs on Wikipedia, which I thought was kind of damning about the whole, not even just relating to Medicare, but just healthcare in general in this country, is that, quote, HMOs often require members to select a primary care physician, a doctor who acts as a gatekeeper to direct access to all medical services, but this isn't always the case. I, one personally, have been finding out this concept is quite true the hard way last 6 months. My own experience, I've been finding out the hard way. Very accurate. Your primary care physician is the gatekeeper.
But what about America and the free marketplace of ideas?
Yeah.
It's interesting. We went from having 5% of gross national product was being spent on healthcare in 1960. 5 years before the implementation of Medicare. In 1960, healthcare was still largely a not-for-profit model because you had a lot of co-ops, like prepaid insurance networks that were essentially just giant credit unions in terms of their structure, where it's you pay into it, but it's largely free at the point of service.
Yeah,
if you just pay a flat annual fee.
Like in other countries where people pay to their government and then their government gives them something that benefits everybody.
So in 1960, 5% of gross national product was spent on healthcare spending. Now, in 2018, we're up to 18.6% of our GDP.
Efficiency, baby.
For perspective, in most OECD countries with universal healthcare, healthcare spending as a percentage of GDP is usually between 8 to 12%. The Canadians spend 15% of GDP on healthcare, so they're not too far away from ours, so their system isn't too great. But the UK spends 10%. The National Healthcare Service is probably the best healthcare system in the West, outside of Cuba. Well, I mean, they're not really the West because they're not a capitalist imperialist power, but whatever. National Health Service is 10, 11% of GDP, British economy. And France has 8%. France is one of the better healthcare systems in the Western capitalist world. They spend only 8%. We spend over 18% for a shittier product. We are literally among OECD countries. The United States is literally dead last in life expectancy.
We suck dick.
by far we are the most wasteful on healthcare spending. It's
absolutely.
It's insane. If you look at a graph, and like the fucked up thing is that
pieces of shit is what we are.
When, like for instance, the World Health Organization, like the way that they rank the strength of a country's healthcare system is by percentage of GDP, which is so fucking backwards. Like, that's just a measure of the amount of money that is wasted in all of these other processes that don't even relate to our actual physical health.
I mean, I don't think it's that backwards in the sense that, like, we waste so much money for much worse product. I think it's like something like 25% of all healthcare spending in this country just goes towards like billing and administration.
Exactly.
Also, Joe, a product is something you buy. Health is something you need to survive.
You could cut out 25 to 33% of American healthcare spending, but just getting rid of the billing and like administrative shit. So it's become quite a disaster.
There may have been a miscommunication between Joe and I, which I will take responsibility for, because it is inarguably true that public healthcare spending corresponds to a healthier public. The problem is that when the World Health Organization publishes reports on healthcare expenditures, the profit margin is obfuscated, making expenditures as a percentage of GDP pretty much meaningless. Comparing the American healthcare system to, say, the Vietnamese healthcare system, it's like comparing apples and oranges. The World Health Organization and its investors are foremost interested in exporting profitable healthcare models to developing countries. In its Global Health Expenditure Database reports, the WHO expresses an objective of achieving, quote, universal health coverage, not universal health care. This is almost exactly the pretense under which Obamacare was rolled out, and we're going to see the devastating consequences that had on the American healthcare system when we get to that part. For now, we're just talking about the developments that set a precedent for legislation like the ACA, and so I'm going to turn it back over to Joe.
Back to HMOs. So the Healthcare Maintenance Organization Act of 1973 was actually sponsored by none other than Ted Kennedy, then a freshman senator, but he was the U.S. senator for Massachusetts for about half a century. And most senators, they find their issue to make their thing. Joe Biden's shtick was foreign affairs, even though he's an imperialist monster. But his shtick was foreign policy. Ted Kennedy was healthcare, though to his credit, he did actually seem to give a shit about like the idea of implementing universal healthcare. He did actually make an actual effort to do that. He just wasn't successful. Ted Kennedy proposed essentially Medicare for all in the 70s. And then the HMO Act that was signed into law was like the compromise. I mean, it's a bad compromise, but like, I guess it's because the HMO Act essentially it was like the birth of employer-sponsored healthcare. Employers with over 25 employees are required to offer federally certified HMO options if a company offers healthcare options. Nowadays, I mean, that's guaranteed that you have to give health insurance options if you have over X number of employees. I think under the current ACA exchange laws, it's 50, but back then it was 25. And the idea was that Kennedy wanted to have the government just give everybody healthcare, universal healthcare, and that idea got shot down. So they decided to have health insurance be tied to the employer. And for employers, this obviously is a gift because you can control your workforce more easily. If the threat of not being able to see the doctor is hanging over their heads if they're trying to leave or they get uppity with wanting like better wages and working conditions, you could just drop the hammer on them being like, fine, good luck like not having health insurance for the 2 weeks in between jobs. So that it was kind of a slow burn because it took a couple decades, but that inadvertently opens the door to Medicare privatization. It would take another quarter century for that to come to pass. But you get to the real meat of like where a lot of this is going to come down to, well, at least a lot of my segment's going to come down to is Bill Clinton.
Chapter 2. The Balanced Budget Act. The Clinton Era.
I talked a little bit about this in the episode we did. I wouldn't quite say it was a deep dive. I mean, we did the whole episode on it, but like there's so much so much further. We could have delved into the details. We could have done a couple more episodes on like how
there's a lot
just
to hate
horrendous
Bill Clinton
is.
for.
So I talked about it about a year and a half ago. The Balanced Budget Act of 1997. The Balanced Budget Act of 1997 did so many terrible things. Among other things, it gave birth to what we would eventually come to know as Medicare Advantage. At the time when it was created in 1997, it was known as Medicare Part C, or also known as Medicare Plus Choice. Now, initially, Medicare Part C was an optional opt-in.
You say plus choice? I like it.
Yes.
I've always found it to be the most convoluted concept possible, and I don't know how they managed to pull this off, that like, okay, we're going to have you opt in to this taxpayer-funded health insurance plan that is actually run and maintained by a private health insurance entity, but it's an optional extra.
Yeah.
Because of freedom.
Yeah, because of freedom. And so Medicare Part C, it wasn't entirely terrible. It was kind of like what me and Jesse have talked about in the past about like direct contracting entity, about how we think it's going to go, which is that like insurance companies are going to play ball long enough for them to like pull the rug out. And so at first, the private insurance companies kind of play ball. They don't do anything too underhanded. It's not entirely terrible. But also part of what the Balanced Budget Act did was cut $156 billion in federal healthcare spending between 1998 and 2002, with Medicare cuts being responsible for $112 billion of those cuts, and hospital inpatient and outpatient payments covered by $44 billion of that cut. The Balanced Budget Act also inflicted skyrocketing increases in Medicare premiums onto Medicare enrollees, which between 1997 and 2007, Medicare premiums jumped by over $8.3 billion, which is a little over $110 in increased premiums per enrollee. A September 1997 report from the Center on Budget and Policy concludes, quote, the next largest source of federal savings, 20% of the savings over the 10-year period, is a provision allowing the states to shift the costs of Medicare deductibles and co-insurance requirements for low-income Medicare beneficiaries from their Medicaid programs to physicians and their providers. Most of the remaining savings derive from the repeal of the Boren Amendment and other minimum payment guarantees for hospitals, nursing homes, and community health care centers that serve Medicaid patients. These payment provisions could prove problematic over time, particularly with respect to the quality of care at nursing facilities with large numbers of residents supported by Medicaid, end quote. What this essentially means is that this is essentially what started the ticking time bomb that eventually went off like 5 or 6 years ago when rural healthcare facilities started to go under because they don't have enough money. Rural like healthcare facilities and like nursing homes historically have relied upon Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement, but in the 90s, the U.S. government cut back on reimbursement, and also the Balanced Budget Amendment Act allowed states for the first time to be able to avoid paying for premiums, copays, and deductibles for Medicaid patients, which is like really, really fucked up.
Hell the fuck no.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so fucking barbaric. And the insane thing is, I spent like 25 minutes reading this report, and honestly, like...
You read the report? Jeez.
These things don't normally hit me that hard, because I'm just kind of... I'm cynical, actually, but also because I spend so much time reading this kind of shit that like it just kind of rolls off the shoulder.
Joe, we need to commend Joe for this, for reading these fucking reports. That's very valiant of you.
I was just sitting there being like, Jesus Christ, this is so much worse than I thought. How the fuck?
Turning your brain to Swiss cheese.
Yeah, pretty much. I was horrified by this shit, and I took healthcare policy classes in college, and I was still just like...
Horrifying shit!
So you have... It's like a ticking time bomb that starts in the 90s and doesn't go off until like the late 2000s, the late aughts, the early 2010s. Like, it's amazing, like, how many of, like, the really terrible things that Bill Clinton did, they didn't go off for, like, another decade or two.
You know, they
deregulating the housing market took, like, 10 years for that to explode. Medicare being gutted in the way it was in the 90s, the cracks didn't start to show until the 2010s. Another part of hacking away at our healthcare system, I talked about this heavily in our Bill Clinton episode about the Welfare Act, the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act of 96, in which they blew up the welfare state and instituted work requirements for Medicare. They instituted work
fucking
requirements
American-sounding
for
thing. I'm
SSDI
sorry.
and SSI. People who are on SSDI are too physically disabled to work, but they are now required to work a minimum of 20 hours a week.
That is fucked.
Yeah.
You're already too physically disabled to work, but you need to work a minimum number of hours to maintain your disability insurance.
You might as well just not have it.
The insane, sickening, psychopathy that is our healthcare system.
We're fucking losers and fucks.
It gets worse.
We're losers. We're worthless, gutless pieces of shit in this country.
It gets worse.
Fuck. Oh, it does.
Gets worse.
I did not like the way that the plan started.
That's so perfect.
Chris, I didn't know you were there.
It's not Chris.
That was the sound drop?
Yes.
Oh my god. It did sound like Chris, though.
That's Fez from fucking Euphoria. We're a pro-Euphoria podcast, by the way.
Yeah, we are.
I guess we didn't get the memo. Okay.
Yeah, no. I made the decision. Unilateral decision.
Please.
Anyway.
We digress.
Go on.
Go on. Further horrify me.
Upcoding.
Wait, upcoding? Yeah, upcoding.
Upcoding. I'm sure Jesse can help me on this one. Upcoding is...
Upcoding?
It's like updog.
Coding with a D.
Okay, yeah, no, that I can tell what that is then. They charge them for codes that didn't actually,
No.
Billing in this country is done by what is known as evaluation and management codes. So it's basically each service, medical services have their own code. Physical therapy for lower back pain is a specific code.
It's relevant.
Physical therapy for right hip pain, that's a different code, and so on and so forth. And
that's
so
weird.
The Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services defines upcoding as when, quote, when a provider assigns an inaccurate billing code to a medical procedure or treatment to increase their reimbursement, which means that, as Scott already said, they come up with codes that didn't actually happen to charge either the provider or the patient in question more money.
That's fucked.
This has been a big part of our healthcare system, particularly Medicare, for the last 25 years, with upcodings going into the ceiling, which is also driving up premiums.
Yep.
Jesse, am I missing anything in upcoding? As you're the one who actually works in the the healthcare field.
He actually does it, folks. He's a hero.
No, I don't.
Of the modern age.
I don't do the billing. I don't have my LADAC yet.
He's not a hero of the modern age. I take it back, folks.
I'm just a fucking pawn of the modern age.
Yeah.
LADAC.
No, that's fine. That'll do. Well, actually, let me say this. As it pertains to, as it pertains to the field I'm in, which is treatment of substance use disorders, this incentivizes companies to fill every fucking minute of the day with something that can be billed for, even when clients would be better off actually going out and networking with people in recovery. There's a profit incentive to keep those people in the house and have them sit in a group and listen to somebody who's been pulled in to give basically an overview of shit that they already know for quote unquote relapse prevention, and that will cut into the time that clients have to go out to commitments at actual meetings and meet people outside of the treatment center where they can form lasting relationships that will strengthen their recovery once they leave. So that shit's it's very backwards when it comes to treatment outcomes and whether or not you care about the quality of the recovery of your clients. That's it.
Alrighty, so moving back to Medicare privatization. The other major thing that really pushed us towards Medicare privatization, I think, is the most strange.
This is a journey.
The way that it came about is probably very strange.
Chapter 3. The Medicare Modernization Act. The George W. Bush era.
The Medicare Prescription Drug Improvement and Modernization Act of 2003, which was signed by George W. Bush over the objection of his own party that controlled both chambers of Congress. And it was done...
Impressive.
At the behest of a Republican president, pushed through Congress largely on the backs of his opposing party.
Yeah, it's crazy how, like, even Republicans know that there's some shit you're not supposed to touch.
Yeah, I know. It was very weird because it barely passed, and, like, Bush wanted to do it, and this was, like, during his first term.
It was dastardly and quite weird.
The bill was proposed, like, a couple months after the invasion of Iraq, and comically enough, it was... Well, I don't know if it's comical, but Dennis Hastert, who was the Speaker of the... Was he the Speaker of the Majority Leader? No, he was the Speaker of the House, Dennis Hastert, who was later convicted of pedophilia. I don't know if that's funny, but, like...
what the fuck, Joe?
The guy who proposes the bill to expand Medicare eventually gets convicted of pedophilia charges, and his answer for healthcare spending was like, "Oh, we should let them take money out of their paychecks for healthcare expenditures." But what ended up happening in Medicare Part D? So it passes the House by like 2 votes, almost all of them Democrats, even though it was a Republican bringing this bill to the floor and a Republican president pushing for it. It's largely just the Democrats pushing it through, which is very weird because they were not in power, nor were they the ones who actually initially proposed this either. This was a Republican proposal that was universally opposed by Republicans.
Well, you know how bipartisanship be. If it's good for corporations, then that's when you can reach across the aisle, you know?
Yeah.
Which is what I'm getting at.
I thought
That's what it's getting at,
me.
folks.
Sorry.
All right, get to it.
Well, the thing that it's most well known for is creating Medicare Part D.
What's the D stand for?
It's prescription drugs.
Does it stand for dick?
Yeah.
Does it
I mean,
stand for
Dick Cheney was president at the time, so sure. And let's be real, Dick Cheney was really the one running the country.
Hey, keep going. You fucking... Anyway.
So Medicare Part D was created. Another important thing, well, I mean, it's important, but most people don't notice this, is that the Medicare Modernization Act is what restricted Medicare from negotiating drug prices. That came as a result of this piece of legislation. It's an interesting contrast because the VA is actually allowed to negotiate prescription drug prices, and the cost to the VA in terms of prescription drug prices is somewhere between 40 to 58% less than what Medicare pays for its prescription drugs. Medicare is not allowed to negotiate drug prices. In fact,
evil cunts.
I remember in 2017, Bernie Sanders, it was January 2017, he put an amendment on the floor during the AHCA fight, which was the Trump administration's attempt to unwind the Obamacare system. And he puts an amendment on the floor to legalize the importation of generic prescription drugs from Canada. It fails 53 to 47, with 13 Republicans crossing the aisle to support Sanders' amendment, but another 13 Democrats crossing the aisle to join the Republicans to oppose this amendment. And most of those 13 Democratic votes, it's very weird when Ted Cruz is actually on the right side of something.
Is it, though?
Yeah.
I mean, Ted Cruz is wrong about most things.
Yeah, it's weird.
That's when you know we're temporarily in a different universe.
Yeah, I know. It's very weird when you have Ted Cruz and some of the most insane Republicans in Congress who are actually on the right side of something, and yet it still doesn't work because you have all of these pharma-owned Democrats. Like, you had Cory Booker, who tried running for president and then got bitch-slapped because of this. Because Cory Booker pharma is basically made him their bitch very early in his career. You have both of the senators from Delaware, which is a pharma state. You have both senators from Maryland. All of these 13 senators have one thing in common. They all take a fuck ton of money from the pharmaceutical industry.
From Rosario Dawson. I mean, what?
So Medicare can't negotiate drug prices because of this bill. Medicare Part D is created. Medicare Part D is also a strange thing because you still have copays. At this point, I'm pretty sure it's something like you still have to pay at least 20% of out-of-pocket expenses for prescription drugs if you're on Medicare Part D.
Yeah, I pay like $4 for prescriptions.
$4 a year?
No, I pay like $4 per prescription with the Medicare Part D.
$4.
Oh, I'm so envious. I pay $20 per prescription usually because all
Well,
of
yeah,
my
the math checks out there. Actually, that's exactly fucking.
Well, I mean, I'm
20%,
paying $20 a month, closer to $30 a month actually. Prescriptions.
Damn, that's
Well,
terrible.
maybe I'm more fucked up than you, Joe. You ever think that?
Yeah.
Charge me extra for that shit.
Mm-hmm. Or less.
I'm more fucked up than both of you guys. I just got a letter from the Healthcare Processing Center that was like, your prescription copay cap has been lowered. Your current cap is $0.
And I thought I guess my spine isn't fucked up enough.
Yeah.
I gotta have more bulge discs.
Yeah, they gotta upcode you.
Yeah, because your spine's fucked up because you don't make enough money.
Apparently,
That's
2
why.
bulging discs in my spine is not fucked up enough.
You want us
Yes,
to take
it
a
is,
baseball
Joe.
bat to it? I'll do that for you, Joe.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'll
I
do
can
that
just
for
go
my
to
comrade.
I can just go to work and have the
Healthcare is like
have the Chevy do that to my spine anyway. We digress.
We digress, folks.
One of the most important things about
I digress.
because
and I undress.
in the context of why we're even talking about Medicare privatization is the Medicare Prescription Drug Improvement and Modernization Act created what we now know as Medicare Advantage.
Woo.
Medicare Advantage. Medicare Advantage.
I like it.
Was a significant and substantive departure from Medicare Part C.
Wait, Part C?
Medicare Part
Yeah.
C is now known as Medicare Advantage.
It's too complicated.
Medicare Advantage is taxpayer-funded, publicly funded insurance plans that are run by private health insurance companies.
By assholes and losers.
So Medicare Advantage shifted significant portions of what was then known as Medicare Part C. It restricted care to specific provider networks. So if anybody remembers Barack Obama talking about if you like your doctor,
I remember
you
Barack
keep it.
Obama.
Well, under Medicare Advantage, you can't. It's basically like having private health insurance, but it's supposed to be Medicare, but it's not really.
It is private health insurance.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
realistically, it's just
It has
where's
a name
the
tag on it.
advantage?
There isn't.
the advantage is freedom, Scott.
It implemented formularies to restrict prescription drug choices, even though the VA has formularies to make it easier to access prescription drug prices, or easier to access prescription drugs. Whereas Medicare Advantage has a formulary that works in the opposite direction.
Access the prices, not the drugs.
I mean, in this country,
That's
it's
its own
basically it is.
nightmare.
It reminds me of that Tim and Eric skit where they're like selling money, like we got the best prices. I gotta put. I'll
discount
cut that.
prices.
I gotta cut that in post.
Fine European prices. They're premium. Come on in, buy $35.50 for $40.
Oh, lay an egg. Go to Tim's discount prices. Our $6.99s are down to $2.99.
Tim buys his prices from China.
Also, I'm sure Jesse is going to want to talk about this, high-risk pools. And I didn't even have to look this up because having
this is
to deal with
complicated,
Paul
folks.
Ryan spending most of the 2010s talking about this is still burned into my brain. Oh, the wonders of the high-risk pools. We're going to put all of the sick people in this pool and charge them more money on account of being sick. It's basically cost sharing, but without any of the healthy people to lower the costs of cost sharing. Cost sharing works when you have the broadest net possible. That's why universal healthcare works. Having the entire population in the same risk pool lowers the price for everybody else. By singling out all of the sick people and putting them in a separate pool and having all of the healthy people in the other pool means that the sick people are paying a fuck ton more money than they otherwise would be, purely because they are sicker than the average person. And that is what you get with Medicare Advantage.
You get no advantage, but you get fucked.
Also,
No,
another
that is the
change
advantage.
to
You get
Medicare
fucked.
Advantage
Oh, okay, I get it.
when you enroll in Medicare Advantage, you're enrolled for the entire year. You can't get out
For
of
the
it early.
rest of your life.
No, not
No, it's a deal. You shake hands with the devil, and he goes, "Okay, let's begin."
Another thing about the Medicare Act in 2003 that doesn't pertain to Medicare Advantage, but it pertains to the other parts, A and B, which are the original parts of Medicare. It significantly overhauled the processing system. So the system for processing claims under Medicare Part A and B shifted towards privatization in 2003. Under the new legislation, the fiscal intermediaries and carriers, the insurance carriers that prior to 2003 had run the system in a not-for-profit fashion and was just about simply getting elderly people the care they needed. The carriers were replaced by what is known as the Medicare Administrative Contractors, which serve both Medicare Parts A and B, and all underlying contracts are now subject to market-based competition.
Freedom.
So wonderful.
Hell yeah. Give me freedom.
Even the vestige of what is held up as a beacon of public health care, it's all about market-based competition.
Yeah.
Freedom. Just goes to show how free we are. Even our freedom has some libertarianism baked into it.
Freedom isn't free, cause folks like you and me.
Is that the end of your segment, Joe?
Indeed.
That is... Ooh, we got so much this week. Jesse, pick it up.
So I tried...
Pick it up.
Thank you, Joe, for setting me up to explain the most recent heinous crimes against humanity.
Perpetrated by the American healthcare system.
Yes.
And our government more broadly.
So, yeah, I mean, you really can't single anybody. Well, I will single a couple of people out. But first one being Barack Obama. But I tried to keep this as palatable as possible, so I will expand all acronyms in my primer, even when it is obnoxious, with the exception of the following.
Barack Obama.
Nope.
That's not an acronym.
He is safe from acronym expansion. So the three acronyms will be...
The Rock Obama.
To be continued. Be on the lookout for episode 82, part 2. We will pick up where we left off, and I'm going to share some very disturbing developments happening right under our noses before we finish out with the usual segments. You can hit up our Patreon at patreon.com/epicincredulity and get involved with our working group if you're in the Boston area. You can even use the contact form at comrade-rosie.org. Hang tight. We'll be back soon. And until then, enjoy your epoch.